Hello, it's CE Sim Golf one more time for this section. I'm going to add one more video because we never really talked about the problems that can arise from this and the errors you can get. And yeah, it's very real. There can be some user errors, some mistakes, and there can be some quirks in the meshes themselves and the export too. So this is going to be shorter, but let's just jump in to take a look at a couple of common things that could go wrong and some ways to fix them, and some ways, well, let's just be real, some places you're going to have to just abandon ship and go back to your last save. So let's head into Blender and take a look. I'm going to kind of do this on the fly and recreate some mistakes, so there might be a little bit of rambling and just trying to show you how to fix things the right way. But let's just tab in quick. So let's look at a bunker. Let's say we forgot to hide the outer ring. That's a common issue. We're gonna pull this lip away, down, just make some edits, and we forgot to hide that outer one. If we have proportional on, remember, that's gonna pull the vertices around it. That's when we get our holes, right? So let's say that we were editing something somewhere. Usually you're gonna see something that obvious and undo. Everybody knows how to do that. But let's say we were doing something somewhere, and see how this looks safe? You don't see it really pulling away. It doesn't take much. Let's say we were just a little bigger, or we went a little too far, and oh, I don't know if you caught it, but a little bit moved over there. So I'm gonna do the same thing here just to create a little bigger area, and I'm gonna overdo it so we can see. All right, so I don't know if you can see that. So let's zoom in. We got our gap here. We created our accidental rip in the mesh. It's a rip in the matrix, as you would say. We don't want the ball to go in there, so we have to fix this. Let's say we did a bunch of other stuff. We were just cruising along. We didn't notice. We can't undo. Even if we try, we either go over the top of something we don't want to undo, or it's just too many steps behind. We can't undo it. This is where you can use you can turn off or proportional. You can rejoin these to this upper mesh, and remember, they don't have to merge. They're a separate mesh, separate 3D object. We just want them to meet and kiss each other, just line butt heads. Okay, so if you remember, they have matching vertices for the most part. So you can see this is the vertices we've accidentally uncovered up here. And these are the two that need to go together. Now, you can select two vertices if you're tabbed into two different meshes, and you can do a merge. But that's not the way we want to do this. Because if we merge them, that's going to cause different problems, and you're going to end up with a single mesh, material issues, all that. All we need to do is use the snap command. And we don't even need to be in both. We're just going to stay in the sand trap because that's the one that we initially messed up. It doesn't matter which of the objects we do this from. You could pull the rough to the sand. You can pull the sand to the rough. Doesn't matter. But we're going to do the bunker. Select the vertice. You can't see the vertices because we're not tabbed into the detail of the rough mesh, but they're there. And they still work for snap. So this is your snap tool. You should probably know that if you're decent at Blender. We're going to move with just the G key, free moving. Don't need to constrain. Now if we get close enough, boom, it's going to snap to that vertice on the other mesh, even though we're not tabbed into that mesh. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go along and I'm going to make sure I hit them all. Like sometimes you can barely see them. So if you're even in the vicinity of somewhere you think you screwed up, just grab them, even like this one, see? These are fine, but just by grabbing them and hitting G, I'll know. It'll either move or it'll say it doesn't need to. Go over here, we did it. Tab in, snap, missed one. Now that's how you get rid of those rips. And I'll be honest, when I was starting out on this and not doing it in the right order or forgetting steps, I had one very gnarly shaped bunker, not this one, but one that looked like that one with a huge outer edge that I screwed up the entire edge. And yes, I had to go all the way around and I had to snap everything. Kind of a pain, but sometimes that happens. Okay, that's how you fix that. Next issue. It's a little difficult to see this one. I probably could have picked a better example, but this will give us the gist. There's a little oddity going on in our texture here. You can see there's just something about it. Seems, why is it doing that? It just seems a little weird. More often than not, and this is just a good step after you've done any of this anyway. Let's see, we're going to bump into, nope, that's the next error, back into Blender. Okay, you can still see I have it selected here. What I did was, any of the operations that we'd been talking about, like making loops, duplicating things, beveling things, if you accidentally right click out of it, or you mean to cancel but you actually still do it without moving anything, it still did it. If you deselect it, you can kind of see better. You've got this edge that's really dark. So why is it dark like that? It's because it's duplicated. It actually performed the operation of adding a loop, but it added the loop right on top because I never drug it anywhere. So if I select a vertex and I drag it without proportional editing, you can see there's two vertices there. So there's almost like a hidden face. And that's causing some weirdness in the texture output. It can cause some weirdness other places for reasons. It can really mess you up if you're trying to move certain vertices and you accidentally grab the wrong one. And you can't always see that they're there. So here's a good step. Go into just vertex mode. Hit A to select all vertexes, then hit M. M is merge. It's going to bring up this menu. Always do by distance. So it's going to merge all vertices that are within a certain distance of each other. Now, we don't want, this tiny menu pops up down here. We don't want to merge, any of these that are too, close together. I think the first default of this is at 0.0101, and usually that's enough. If vertices are right on top of each other, it won't matter. You could click it up to be safe. And it says right down here, removed 86 vertices. I don't know if you see it at the bottom. There's a little message. You should do that off and on or before exporting, just out of safety reasons. It's never going to screw up your mesh unless you put your threshold like way up. You'll start seeing stuff merge you don't want to merge. So just don't do that. Just back off to a safe distance that everything looks okay and it still tells you how many are removed. And if none are removed, great. Your mesh was probably fine. And then when you export that in, your texture problem should be fixed. All right, next problem. Oh my gosh, where did my bunker go? The whole thing is gone. Did I make a hole in my mesh? Well, if I look back at Blender, no, I still see it. So what happened? This doesn't happen much in bunker editing, but I've had this happen in other places. Just had to fix a cart path because I was messing with it. This is a normals problem. If you don't know what normals are, it means the direction that the face of the object is pointing. You can look at it by turning on overlays up in this top corner. Way at the bottom it says normals, and it's going to give you these little lines that show you where the normal goes. If you look, you can see the lip. The normals are pointing inwards towards the bunker. It means that's the face that we can see. So if you look at that in Unity, yeah, we can see the lip. They're facing the right direction. Now, if you go underneath your mesh, I'm going to rotate underneath. Look at that. Our sand normals are pointing down. That's a mistake. So we're going to select just the sand material. We have a face selected, that material. Going to go up to the mesh menu, normals, flip. Now we have all of our direction lines for normals pointing up, just like all of our lip ones. Now, tab back out and export that FBX. Go back to Unity, ta-da, all better. So that's how you flip the normals around if you've got holes in your mesh that you know aren't real holes. All right, last one I'm gonna go over. This is a doozy, and it took me a little while to figure out, but it wasn't too big a deal. And it kind of leads into the next series I'll be doing. So let's go back into Blender. You know what? I took a screenshot of this because I can't really repeat it on command. Sometimes when you go to export selected FBX, you're going to get this window that pops up over here, and it looks scary, and it looks like, where's Photoshop, screen capture? Looks like this. It's an error. It will not export your FBX, and it spits out this this gross stuff here. Now, I don't know anything about coding. I don't write the scripts and stuff for Blender or Unity at this point, but I know how to read it a little bit. Now, I had to abandon ship and lose some work because I couldn't figure this out the first couple of times. But then I started trying to really read it and figure it out, and I noticed something. It talks about more than once in here. It references UV, and I see it in a couple different places in here. Now, what UV mapping is, here you can say it here, lay UV. It's trying to, UV mapping is what we're going to talk about in the texturing. It's a way that it frames or knows how to apply a texture onto an object or a mesh. And it can be used to create mesh texturing that is not repeating, not tiling. But all of these have some in them. And I think when we break apart and like say we take the rough surround and we make a new mesh out of it to have a new 3DG application or something like that, that can break the mapping that's created automatically by the OPCD scripts. So there's really, it's not too hard to fix. It's taken me a couple tries once to do it, but the easiest way to go after it is to remap it. Now, there's no error on this right now, but I'll show you what you can do. The easiest way to do these, because they're sort of, if you think of them as flat, is to do a UV map from above. So let's say that our new rough surround I made for this bunker didn't want to export. That's where we were getting the error. So we're going to focus on it with the period key, go to an overhead view using the 7 key, and then we're going to remap it. If you can hold on for just a second, I need to stop my cat from clawing the crap out of the carpet. So we've switched to our top view. I'm not going to get deep into UV mapping because I don't know everything about it, and it's going to be more talked about in the next texturing series of videos. But once we're in our top view, what we're going to do is tab in, and we need to be face selected. So we're going to go to 3, all. So once you have all your faces selected, the command is under the mesh menu when you're tabbed in and under face. So we have everything selected. We're going to go mesh. I'm sorry, UV menu. I was still thinking about the other one. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. What I've done is I've tabbed in. I'm on the face select mode. That's the shortcut 3. And I have all faces selected. And that's important, especially if you have just one material. Now, because we're looking straight down at it now with the top view, it's going to project straight down the UV mapping. I'm not going to get too deep on mapping right now because I don't know everything about it, and I'll talk about what I do know more in the next series. But for now, we're going to go to UV, and we're just going to use project from view. That means, think of it as like taking a photograph from straight above, and that photograph will be the coordinates or the how we lay the texture on it. And because it seems to have lost that when we created a new mesh out of the old one, you sometimes need to go back into the other mesh, which in this case is the giant rough surround for this area. So we're going to go back into tab, 3 for face mode, A for all. Now we have all faces of the rough selected. UV, project from view. That's it. Deselect everything, go back out. Now you should be able to export the FBXs without an error. That's how I have fixed that particular one like that. Those are some of the common mistakes that I have encountered doing this, but there are certainly other mistakes to be made, especially if you're experimenting. So post in the channel, and we'll work through them. Maybe someone can teach me a thing or two as well. Thanks again. But wait, there's more. I forgot one critical error that I've run into quite a number of times, and that is when you make a new mesh from a surrounding mesh. Like I took the rough, I broke off this individual section to have a longer grass there hanging over my bunker. When you do that, you can lose the connection to your collider that's on the mesh, or it just doesn't add one occasionally, and I'm not sure why. Sometimes it does and doesn't. Something to do with the way I drag it into the scene maybe. But if I select my giant rough, the original mesh, you can see over here we've got mesh collider, and it names the same spline right here that is the mesh renderer. That's the spline object that we're using. Now if I look at the little one, the one I created, it's not here. I've got the mesh renderer, I've got my new sub mesh here, it named the same 4492 rough 001. That was my new one I broke off. But there's no mesh collider in here. And sometimes you'll see the mesh collider will exist, like if it was an original FBX that you created, but this will say missing right here. And sometimes on your new ones, actually most of the time, you won't see it at all. So we're gonna go add component, type in mesh, we're gonna grab mesh collider, and this time it automatically found it. You can see right here, it said, okay, this is the mesh it's made from. It's going to add the mesh collider. If it doesn't, or if you are looking at your original mesh and there is nothing in there, let's just delete it. I'm just going to remember. Okay, it says mesh none. Now, if you leave it like this, when you play the game and someone hits a ball that hits this surface, it will disappear and fall into the void and it'll crash. So we have mesh none under mesh collider. We're going to add that in there, and all you have to do in the select mesh 4492 is the name of our mesh. Now which one is it? You can see there's two because I had a sub mesh. I'm looking at the large surface, so I'm going to grab that one right there, double click. Alright, does it match? 4492 rough, 4492 rough. Yep, we're good. Alright, that's how you fix the mesh missing collider. Now we're finally done. Thanks for watching. On to the next series.